So as BAs, we day in and day out deal with a lot of requirements and the requirements management. So let's understand how we can align the requirements towards improving customer experience, because most of the products or the projects that we work on might not be explicitly called as a customer transformation, but implicitly we are all trying to solve a business problem, putting customer in the center. So we have Mr. Ashu Potnis, Vice President, Product Development, who will speak on this topic. Ashu has his career's 28 years of experience in, he started from COBOL code on mainframe, character mode screens. In 1996, he co-developed SQL Navigator, a widely popular tool for Oracle databases. In the past decade, he has been busy simplifying and explaining requirements management, use case modeling, and agile processes in his training and consulting assignments that have taken him across 4 continents. Let's welcome Ashu.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you are all having a good time. So I'm here to talk about, we all know CX is important, customer experience is important. My talk today is based on putting customer experience in the context of the enterprise, as well as the tools and methods that you can use to actually quantify and communicate. Because until we do, we are able to actually understand what customer experience is for your organization, how are you going to even start to improve it? That is the core of my presentation today. So first, we will look at what your organization's needs and priorities are. It's always, in business analysis, we often work at very low level, small projects. These are small plants, you can say, in a big forest. And the whole bigger context is not understood. And the aim, the goal is to really understand what each project, every product, every change is going to do in terms of enhancing the capability of the company, of the product, or the organization. So we need to understand first, and I'll try to link all of this together in today's presentation. So really the top thing for any organization is the raison d'etre for an organization's existence, which is reason for existence, which is what a mission statement is. So an organization exists to do something, and that's where its number one need comes from. So once that is defined, and this is an example of a mission statement, it provides the framework in which the rest of the operations of the company happen. The goals are set, and when goals are set, that is where the IT comes in to help company achieve those goals. So this is an example that we have on the screen here. It's a example of a insurance company, right? To provide cost-effective insurance plans in their industry, in that scope of small to medium vessels, etc. So this defines what that company is out to do. The next step usually the company has is the vision. Vision of a company or organization is what it wants to be in the future. This is what guides the actions, the IT projects that help those actions to help companies achieve those objectives at the highest level, right? So vision is the next, actually you can think of the need from an organization's point of view that drives further things down. So this is an example, for example. So the mission was to do, provide insurance services in small to medium vessels in the medium marine insurance industry. But what is it they want, where they want to go? They want to be in North America, Europe, and Japan and become a leader with over 70% market share. So at this point, then you need to sit down and then, or rather the executives need to sit down or the management needs to sit down and decide the things that are defined goals-wise that will actually help them get there. So next, the vision is then refined into organizational goals. And those goals can be, for example, in this case, could be enter those markets. So if they are only in the North American market, they need to get into those markets. And getting into market is a lot of work. You need to understand the regulatory compliance, the personal or the habits of the people, customers in those regions. Sometimes there are different business practices. Sometimes there's language differences. So all that has to be incorporated because nothing works without IT nowadays. So everything has to be incorporated into IT systems to enable to achieve those goals. So here, for example, I just put down a few, like compliance with maybe those markets, languages. There could be improved customer experience if you want to expand your market share. Improved shareholder value is normally always there for public companies. And increasing the market share from present 45 to the vision of 70. And now these goals are normally what taken and the PMO's office is going to come up. So in fact, so if you put it all together, that's kind of how it, at the highest level, you've defined in a succinct way what the company wants to do, where it wants to go, why it exists, where it wants to go, and the goals that need to be reached to go there. This is what basically is the input to PMO's office, where these need to be translated to the next level objectives, which is business or project objectives. So now we started at the highest level and we got the goals. Now those goals can be derived into project or business objectives. And these objectives, they are smaller objectives. For example, an objective could be to implement business rules for Japanese insurance market, for marine industry, right? That is the objective, and then it will flow down into business requirements, which could flow into business rules, functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and business rules, regulatory requirements, etc. So that's kind of the big picture of the organization, how it is working, and it is putting together the body of requirements to achieve its vision, basically, by its goals. And now we need to think about this being the context when we are developing products to satisfy these markets and the company's goals. Where does the customer experience come in and how you can influence it? Because customer experience today is the vehicle by which you gain loyalty, by which you gain market share, and there's in a hyper-competitive internet-based competition, that is the differentiator. So what is customer experience? So let's again put that in perspective before we start looking into basically, resolving it into smaller parts where they fit in. So customer experience, or CX, most commonly we call it that, is defined as interactions between a customer and the organization throughout their business relationship. So whether it is looking at an ad or actually buying thing, getting an email, getting an SMS, they are all customer experiences. You know those companies, I'm not going to name companies, but there are certain companies who keep sending you SMS messages. What do you think about them? You think they are just spammers. And these are big companies. I get them on my phone too. And we have a negative feeling about that company just because they are taking advantage because they have our phone number. Every single touch point where a customer interacts in any fashion, or even if they don't interact, they are passively bombarded, is adding to the customer experience of that particular individual. So, what are the touch points? There can be many touch points. I mean, the one I have on here, and we'll just go through them in one by one, but these are just illustrative. They are dependent on the line of business you are in, and some may apply, some may not apply, and some more may apply. So that's kind of a job for a business analyst first to figure out what are they going to be. Now, all business analysts, don't work at the highest level, so they're not necessarily going to be able to influence what kind of video ad is going to run on YouTube or on the TV or on the radio, but the package of customer experience does have it. So for an organization, if the customer experience is that important, they probably should have a chief CXO, customer experience officer. But anyway, that's up to the maturity level of the organization, whether they want to go in direction, they want to have somebody heading all the departments to ensure a consistent and cogent plan to address the customer experience. So marketing messages and collateral, that is where, usually what first touch point for a customer is. It could be TV, ad, radio, just billboards, or newspaper, email marketing, anything of that sort. That's usually one of the first contacts that a company or organization has with the customer. Next is website. Website is often business analysts are involved in defining websites, so that's where business analysts definitely can contribute. But a website contributes very much to the experience of the user. One of the first ones being it should be available on devices, on all devices, and information should be easily accessible, things like that. Third is usually screens and forms. I mean, most businesses that are moving to the web have some kind of way to reach out to the customer, where they have to fill forms for any reason. I mean, just to get a quote for insurance, or all the way up to submitting a loan application or something more complex like that. Emails and letters, these are just transactional ones. Could be your bill is so much, thank you for your payment, or all kinds of rejection of somebody's loan application. It can vary a lot. Personal interactions, I mean, some people have offices, local offices. If you go to the Airtel office or a telephone office, that's a personal interaction. Telephone, often either for sales or for support. Even the way the numbering systems are for your ACD systems, automatic call systems, those also matter in terms of usability and what customer will have feeling after having used those. After sales support, of course, we all know, and even the appearance of the office, how it is if it's you set up an office. So these are only a few that actually contribute to what a users may go away with a feeling, which is really what customer experience is. It's the feeling that a customer has emotion for a company. It's at an emotive level. It's not at a rational level, customer experience. So that's why it is not transactional. It is like the whole bag that needs to be taken consideration of. So I come to this topic now, having started with organization's overall needs. Where does the organization want to go, and how do they come to the goals and objectives? And what is the customer experience and the touch points that the customers has? Looking at that, and our next aim is to see how we can improve it. I mean, that's probably why we are all meeting here in this convention, at least in the theme that of this convention is. And just like requirements, right? You can write requirements in hundreds of Word documents, Excel, we do it all the time. If you want to do it in a structured way, you need to give it a definition. You need to have different requirement types. Sometimes you need to use models like use cases or data modeling. That gives structure to your requirements. Without structure, it's the information takes too long to consume and too long to communicate, and there can be errors. I mean, you can write a data, just take example of data modeling. You can write all that and give it to database administrators and developers. It will have a precision of some level. And if you can do that in a data modeling tool and also give the same to developers, DBAs, and developers, that will have a different level of precision. And you will be able to spot errors, for example, missing keys, missing indexes, or missing foreign keys, or even data items. So that is the rigor that a process of structured requirements brings into requirements. What can we do similarly for CX? Is there a way by which we can bring rigor which will not only help us document and communicate more accurately, but also find gaps and make sure what we set out to do, we are making a full coverage of, right? So let's look at that. What could be better than process modeling? And this is actually a question to you. We'll have a discussion on this. But process modeling is really very, very beneficial when you come to customer experience, documentation, and of course, subsequent improvement. Let's see why. First of all, in a process model, you have a separate pool, for example, the top pool, and I don't think we can see the what is in it very clearly, but I'll read it out. It's the applicant, and then there is a loan officer and loan underwriter who are processing the loan application. So the interactions are so explicit, first of all. There is the pool, you can clearly see where the customer is, and you can see the processes that are happening in the background, which the customer may not be aware of, but he is getting the output, he or she is getting the input and the output from there. So the touch points become clear. But even more so, the benefit of this process is business processes modeling is one of those things which also can model offline stuff. What happens when somebody comes to your office? What happens when somebody calls a phone front office, which may not be an IT system? Because as you know, in process modeling, you can model manual processes also. That is why it is a more complete way by which you can document your customer experience touch points that are there in your organization or for your service. And it is a more encompassing method of documenting that. So let's see, for example, in this particular process I have up on the screen, there is a loan application for which there is a loan application form. That is the first touch point for this process. There could be others, website does that, but for this process it starts there. Then there is a send approval letter, which is a touch point, and then there is the rejection letter, that is a touch point. So we have identified 3 which are going to influence the customer experience directly. There could be more. I mean, sometimes when you submit, you can also call and find out. It's not modeled here, but if it was, you would have to document that. There could even be an instance where people can walk into an office and ask what happened to my loan application. That you would have to model as well. But for our sake right now, we have the touch points identified by the means of this particular process flow. What happens once you identify the touch point is next is how to improve. And there's 2 ways of improving actually. I have only one identified here, but there's 2. So as we look at this, we can see the touch points and the background stuff that is happening, right? So for the touch point, we can then, and again, you can have a CX committees, BAs, or I don't know who all you can involve, product managers. And so first thing is for the submission form, you can make it more intuitive and usable. So that's because that's the first experience user is having. Next, the touch point is an approval letter. Clarity is very important, what the user is getting. this is the interest rate we can offer you, this is the loan we can offer you, these are the terms, these are the payments. So clarity is, of course, number one. And usually that is there. What we don't usually think of is the personal touch, where you want to say you're a valued customer and make the user feel important and valued by the company. And there is so because again, CX is an emotional engagement with the organization. Even more important is actually the rejection letter. If you cannot give loan, you never know. That customer may come back 6 months, 1 year, and maybe in a better credit history or a better situation where you may be able to give that. Or maybe you can give a loan for a different type of, if you can't give a car loan, you can give a house loan because there's a better collateral. So it's never a lost customer. So again, clarity and empathy, because the customer may feel rejected. Your job is to ensure that is minimized so that they leave with a positive feeling and positive image of the company. So now these were the touch points, these three. But there is more to it, because you did it in a process modeling way. We also know what happens behind the scenes. So when you look at those tasks, you can see that the first one, where it is a check application which is being done by the loan officer, whether all the documents are correct or not, and salary and certificates and ownerships or collateral, whatever it might be. There we can identify what a user delight might be. A user will be delighted as quickly as they can get the information that their loan application has been accepted, first of all, which is where, so the speed becomes a point where a business analyst can then see how you can improve the speed, whatever it might be, either improving giving more information to the user, maybe with one click being able to get a credit history from the credit union. It could be faster verification of bank accounts, or whatever else it might be that can get that job done faster. A business analyst can play a big role in. And the second is review application. Again, the same thing for the loan underwriter, speeding it up, making sure it is being routed to, because there are always multiple of these, how these are routed, the queues, the process which decides which underwriter is going to get which application. Those kind of things, again, a business analyst can influence through the IT systems, right? Because that is what we can influence, is the IT systems. So that would be a point where this whole thing can be influenced and improved. But what about the details? And that is where I was going with when I started with organizations' requirements, and also the topic of today's presentation is aligning those with the CX work. Because you cannot just take this one and say, okay, yeah, I'm with these points, go ahead and do that. You have to actually do something about it, because as a business analyst, you change the needs, which may be high level, which may be abstract, into actionable requirements that can be understood by the developers, because their job is not necessary to understand the business all the time. That is the job of the business analyst. So these need to be clarified. They need to be better documented, that so they're translated into actual IT systems. And how do you do that? So that is my next argument, where this sort of all comes together. So if you look at the first one, where it's the submit application, first of all, there will be some requirements behind it, right? And those can be in the form of use case or user story, or maybe just functional requirements. Actually, I didn't write it because people normally do one of these two things nowadays. But so submit an application can be documented in a user story format, or a use case format, or a functional requirement format. I mean functional and non-functional. And the form itself, which also is important from usability point of view, can be done using a screen markup. Same thing with the internal processes. And then we have the letters, which can be done in the form of templates. So you can take the business process and link with these other artifacts. Ideally, you should be able to link a user story or a use case to a shape, a mock-up to a data shape on the business process model, or templates, report templates, email templates, nice package. So that's your package of CX. One other thing that as I said, is going to be two ways to improve this. One other was, sometimes the process itself needs to change. Maybe the underwriter can do both the jobs. I mean, I'm just thinking aloud here, maybe not. But so there is an as is and to be process. In fact, that might be the first thing you may want to do as a business analyst, and see if the process itself should be changed, right? That's a big, I think the biggest flexibility is really if you can influence the process itself. And for that, you need to have obviously communication with the business leaders and executives, etc. But that could be the first thing where the speed or can be influenced, the customer can be influenced. And once you have actually come to the, or decided that that is the process, it's the correct process, then all these become, kind of becomes the next step. So if we are to do user story, this is a user story format, but where is the CX in this, right? There is no details. So as a customer, I want to submit loan application so that I can purchase a new car. I mean, we all write like that. But where will the CX come in? And as a business analyst, you can influence that. And that's going to be in our next screen, which is the acceptance criteria. So usually the acceptance criteria does have things like non-functional requirements, business rules, and maybe the form should not take more than 3 seconds to submit. But if you put the CX into it, you can add CX requirements into it. And some of these can be organization-wide, so you should be able to reuse, for example, things where company branding or devices, or if you start from the top, first one is actually display screen in local language. That probably will come from business anyway. Should be intuitive enough to be usable by a 60-year-old computer novice. So that's something that you can provide. And then thinking through, it should allow user to save partial form and return to it later. Nowadays, a lot of big forms have this capability, and it's very much appreciated. It's very important. The screen should automatically save partially filled forms so that a user can return to it if there's a disruption. So again, thinking through how people use these systems and leaving them with a good feeling. How many times you've gone to a website, purchase, I mean, it happened to me recently, where it doesn't remember what you did previously and something crashes. It could be even be your own browser, but it's a huge problem because now all that work is wasted and you don't have a good feeling about that site or that company. So these are all the ways by which, and I mean, these are really just illustrative. You could be having 50 or 100 of these for every user story. So that's where the CX design, CX requirements can actually be added after identifying touch points. The other option that can be used is if your organization uses use cases. The good thing about use cases is they also actually show the interactions. So if you have the interaction of how the loan application interaction will happen, what will be the exception conditions, what will be shown, they can actually be shown as a success scenario and alternate scenarios. So you can add usability and other requirements to the steps, and you can model it using a use case scenario. That's another option you have. This one, compared to user story, is a little different because it talks about what the system will do and what the response will be. Sorry, customer will do, how the system will respond. So it makes you think through it a little bit more. So in some cases, this is also appropriate, or this can be more appropriate also even, especially mobile screens. Where you have a lot of interactions, this helps sort out the sequence in which it will happen, what messages will be shown, and so forth. So you can write those messages and think about them in advance. So yeah, having exceptions or messages, they can be polite or there can be empathy, things like that. The other is, of course, screen mockups, because mockups or screens, I mean rather, are how you have how you communicate a company's consistent brand to the public, so they feel they are getting the same experience throughout. Branding becomes very important. But more than the branding, it is also to do with the usability, the intuitiveness, and making it easy and frictionless for users to use it, right? So you can also do things like adding usability requirements, and in this case, for example, pre-filling state and country based on the IP location of the user, right? I have not found this happened yet. I have found websites that change their payment method to INR or USD or GBP based on where you are, but normally address is never pre-filled. It's something that can be done easily. So you have to find the country and state and fill all of those things in. Not needed. So that's where it is another opportunity to think about user experience and add those requirements accordingly. So to put everything in a concise way, where the topic of my presentation is this slide, which puts it all together. So customer experience is always in the context of organization's goals and requirements. So if you look at the left side here, we have the organization needs, business projection, business and project objectives, and from there, the requirements. Obviously, the business objectives or project objectives define what projects will be done. So that's kind of what PMO decides. This is the project to take, this is the budget, we're going to do it. And then you start refining requirements, etc. for it. Side to side is the process flow, which tells you how the customer is going to interact with your system, and whether it will be manual, whether it will be electronic, and if so, what are the touch points. And there you have the opportunity to find areas of improvement and change, improvement, and so forth. And then how do you document that? What can be improved, or what can be tested also, right? Because the reason, by the way, why do we do requirements? Requirements' primary goal really is that they can be tested. If you don't write the requirements, you can't test it. So how do you know it does what the intended goal of the system was, right? Same way, CX requirements, if you don't document, you're not able to test them or validate them or ensure that they go in the output, what the customer is actually going to see. So for that, you can, after identifying the touch points in the business process, you can again use the mockups, stories, and use cases, or any one of them, or whatever else works, but linked to the process. I think process is actually essential. Others depends on what your process or methodology you follow in your organization for the business process modeling. So that is actually the gist of my presentation today as to how to go about aligning requirements, organization, business objective, detailed requirements with customers' touch points and the requirement detail that you write with organization. And there can be traceability in all of this. If you use a tool or if you use the right method, you can tell this requirement satisfies that business goal, and it also is in this CX process. So it gives a nice matrix of the two things. So I know I'm between you and food, lunch, but now we can have some questions and answers that you may have about this model. Anybody has any questions?
Hello. That was a wonderful session. Thank you. When we are tracking the non-functional requirement as such, right? Let's say the load testing or the performance testing. Usually what I get to hear from the developers and the customer's point of view is like the efficiency should be at the maximum level, which in a real-time scenario is not cost effective. So when we are trying to track them in the acceptance criteria or the definition of done, non-functional requirement stands out right now, because unless a system is already built and the baselining of the non-functional requirements is done, till that point, this point of non-functional requirement doesn't come into SIS. So how are we going to track them in the initial phases itself?
No, that's a good point. I mean, some of the most scope changes that can happen due to non-functional. Simple thing like going from single language to multiple language implementation can change the budget by 30%. It just depends on, or changed in performance parameters can also do the same thing. It's not a good answer to that, except that you try to elicit the non-functional requirements very early on. What devices it would work on, what kind of user load, performance, geographical locations it's supposed to serve, and there probably should be a checklist before. The second thing is performance requirements or many others have no meaning unless they have real parameters, 100 users within 1 hour or something like that, or how many records are going to be processed. Just by saying it's efficient, as you know, is not a good practice. So you want to get those and get signed off, then somebody can change. And if they do, they have to pay for it. So I would suggest just putting it earlier on in the cycle, probably having a checklist of these things.
Hello. I have heard of TOPTEAM ANALYST, and I think I have had a look at it. And as a requirements management software, it's very good. But have you brought in some elements of CX into the software?
That's a good question. We have thought about it. CX. And of course, we are completely open to what your input might be in that. But a tool, and again, not just TOPTEAM, most tools can adapt to any process. Certainly ours can. So you can have steps in there which say, a requirement type called CX requirement, and then you can link them to user stories or use cases, and there'll be traceability. You can reuse some of the requirements. You can have a global library from where it can be reused for all projects, for example. So that ensures consistency. But beyond that, these things are already there. So unless there is a model or a tool, and again, we are open to hearing, because we think about these things and we believe these are the best way by which you can actually address the CX question, how to do that. But if there's others, we're very open to.
CX would always be measured by certain parameters.
Yeah.
And now you could relate these parameters to, because we talked about business goals, but there is also something. You also talk about business capabilities. So customer experience, yes, it is essential to have, but it's linked to your business capabilities. If a certain business is not capable, certain business capability is not there, you can address, you can go to requirements, you can go to customer experience, but you will not be able to address it until you go up and actually bring that capability into your business. So, like you already have a requirements management software. So if you broaden it, using some parameters and attributes where you could link it all together. So you could have, a CX dashboard which comes out once you have finished your requirements. You're putting all your, business goals and then drilling it down to requirements.
Excellent point, actually. So to address that, I use a fairly simple model where you go from mission, vision, goals, and then business objectives. Oftentimes, as you said, companies also have capabilities somewhere there. So define their verticals as well as what they are able to do in a particular vertical. The other is KPIs. People often use KPIs. So in a tool like TOPTEAM, you can create objects with their relationships to maybe the vision statement or to something else. So you can certainly add those as well. I mean, so the model is flexible enough, or rather the tool is flexible enough to implement any kind of module. And how you would roll up is a good question.
Because as you said, I mean, nowadays CXO is most companies have a separate CXO just because CX has become so important. So when you are having a CXO, doesn't it make sense that a company links its business goals to customer experience? So the parameters can be worked out.
Right.
You could link the business goals, or you go a level further to business needs, and then you can link it to certain customer experience parameters.
Right, right. I mean, just off the cuff, it's possible, for example, to create link types and then link a record, for example, KPI, and say this use case or this user story or this process is linked to this KPI, meaning it's contributing to it. Or, but so that would be a qualitative. You could say, I want to see for this KPI what all work we are doing. That's possible to do. There's tagging available. There is linking available. Quantitatively, I can't say because I don't know what figures will be rolled up. How to measure CX? I'm not sure if there is any.
No, but like you have not looked at collaborating with a CX company just to that you bring a CX framework into your product. Rather than, of course, I mean, linkages,
Right.
all softwares can provide you linkages. We can generate a report by putting a pointer and,
Yeah.
you could do that. But I'm looking more at, having CX framework built into as an additional component within the product.
Right, right. Yeah, I understand. Yes. Always scope for improvement. Thank you. Any other question? Well, if there are no other questions, I would say thank you so much for attending today's session, and have a very good rest of the for the rest of the conference. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashu. Thanks for the very nice presentation and showing us what are the various ways in which actually we can align our requirements.